I will be doing the video. What I think I'll probably do is I put the video out on my YouTube where it doesn't get many views. The podcast is mostly audio, but I will put this up on LinkedIn as a LinkedIn Live so people can watch it on LinkedIn, which they enjoy.
Okay, good.
So we'll get lots of use out of it.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Well, Nancy, I'm actually I'm a little nervous to have you on the show. I feel like I'm with a celebrity and I'm a little nervous.
No, don't be daft.
In my world, you're a celebrity.
Oh, that's really sweet.
Oh my gosh. I have you in my head from reading your stuff for so long. So it's wonderful to have you.
Thank you.
I want to talk today about a few things. I want to talk about neurodivergent leadership, your own experiences, obviously what you teach. You run a business, you're always traveling and doing public speaking, you're very much out there. I also want to talk a little bit about clean language and clean language coaching, because I think that it is really transformative. It's something that you write about a lot, and I assume that you practice a lot because you write about it all the time. And I thought we could even do like a role play so that listeners could hear an example, because I think it only really makes sense if you can hear it.
I agree. It's a little bit like learning karate. You can't learn karate from a book. You have to participate. You have to see it. You have to experience it. And I think clean language is like that.
Fair enough. I've never learned karate, but that makes sense to me. But let's start. You write about leadership. You write about leadership as a paradox. We want leaders who are strong and vulnerable, who do what's right instead of easy, but then we punish them if they make mistakes or if they let us down. And I think being a neurodivergent leader, and also a leader who just feels things very deeply, adds an extra layer on top of that. And so I'm curious how you've sort of personally lived inside that paradox and what you've learned about yourself and your leadership after many years doing it now.
I think I would say that I had the power and influence of leadership before I was personally ready to accept that role, if that makes sense. And so I think a lot of the things I learned in a hurry by making mistakes. So it was kind of backfilling the learning. I studied occupational and industrial organizational psychology. And in that particular academic discipline, there is a lot of research on leadership, which I was never interested in as a student. I was always interested in cultural change and inclusion and careers and coaching. But as I became a leader, I suddenly thought to myself, oh my goodness, I'm really out of my depth here. Let me go and find what my discipline has to say about leadership. And I couldn't find anything that helped me.
Really?
So the whole leadership body of research seemed to me to be targeted at correcting the excesses of arrogant, bossy men.
Yeah.
And, I think when you come into leadership and you're not an arrogant, white, middle class, when you're not all of those things, you need different advice. And I couldn't find the advice that I needed. So I worked on myself with coaching, and some of that was clean language coaching. But actually, at that point in my career, the coaching that I really benefited from was acceptance and commitment therapy-based coaching, because it's very values based. It's very about that kind of coaching is very much what are your North Stars in terms of your values? How do you orientate yourself? And then to what extent is what's happening bringing you closer to those values or further away from those values? And those were really interesting reflections for me. And also I needed the self-acceptance at that point in my career as well. So I had to kind of work out my own model of leadership, because there wasn't good guidance, I don't think, at that time. I think there is more now. I see more out there about kind of assertiveness training, confidence training for female leaders, for leaders from communities of color. I see more of what I needed now, but it certainly wasn't there 10, 15 years ago, that's for sure.
I know, it's interesting. I'm 49, almost 50, and I like to tell younger women, when I was coming up, there wasn't mentorship training, there wasn't women's leadership training. And, for me, I also felt like I was leading big teams at age 25, neurodivergent, although I had no language for that then, crying in the bathroom every day. And I simply didn't know what to do. There was nobody to talk to. And I think that's hard to understand. I mean, that wasn't that long ago for people today, although I still think many of the old tropes exist. Certainly when it comes to being strong versus vulnerable.
They do. And it's positioned very much as either or. That's the issue. And I think part of the paradox for me is it's both and. I cannot be strong without being vulnerable. And I cannot be vulnerable unless I am strong. Yeah. So, vulnerability without strength is exposure, it's shame, it's self-chastisement, it's failure. And strength without vulnerability is brittle and cruel and lacking in empathy. So I think strength and vulnerability are intrinsically intertwined. I think they are the same thing. I would say that my vulnerability is my strength, and my strength allows my vulnerability to emerge. And the stronger I've got, the more happy I am to be truly vulnerable.
So true. It's so true. When did you learn that you were neurodivergent, or when did you have the language to put behind that?
Well, so I was diagnosed formally with ADHD when I was 38 years old. I'm 50, similar age to you. And, bear in mind that it had been my specialism for about 13 years by that point. So that's, that says all you need to know about Gen X women getting diagnosed with ADHD, right? So, right. But I think, my history, it was very clear that I wasn't neurotypical. I had a period in psychiatric care when I was a teenager. I didn't go to school for the last 2 years of high school. I did my degree as a mature student, and I loved work, but I hated school. And I left home when I was 16, and I had sort of quite a tumultuous teenage years and entry into adulthood. It was not an easy journey at all. So I'd kind of came into my career with that history, and then the more I'm diagnosing and doing history taking, the more I'm realizing that my history is it's pretty typical for an undiagnosed neurodivergent woman, but of course that diagnosis wasn't available to me as a teenager. So I had lots of other diagnoses. I had anxiety disorder, I had depression, I had anorexia, I had bulimia, I had school phobia, which was my personal favorite. So I had lots of other diagnoses, but none of them really fit. And so neither did any of the approaches or supports that I was getting fit. And it's one of the things that motivated me to study psychology. And then when I left home, I worked in various jobs. But when I was 18, I started working as a support worker for adults with autism and learning disabilities, or intellectual disabilities, I believe you call it in the States. So I was doing personal care support, feeding, toileting, washing, caring. And I saw a lot of clinical psychologists as well in that experience. And I just kept coming across psychologists. I'm going, you guys don't know what you're doing. Like literally, this is broken. You're offering the wrong support to the wrong people all the time. Like, what is the matter with you people? And it finally made me angry enough to go and get my degree. And one of my children, I have 20-year-old twins, and when I was talking to one of them about careers about 3 or 4 years ago, I was explaining this, and my kid says to me, "So, Mum, is your entire career based on a grudge?" And I'm like, Yeah, it kind of is. Yeah. I thought psychologists were wrong. I thought I had to go and like tell them off and like learn what they'd learned so that I could argue with them and disagree. And I kind of went into workplace psychology rather than clinical psychology,
Hmm.
because I realized that I wasn't robust enough to have that battle with the
Oh,
clinical
that's
or the
interesting.
educational psychologists. Yeah, the educational. So when I was in my early 20s, I hadn't done enough healing to be able to cope with
Mm-hmm.
that. I would have
Mm-hmm.
found that very, very difficult. I would have been battling a huge, impenetrable patriarchal system of ivory tower academia and large healthcare institutions or large educational institutions, and I wouldn't have survived that battle. I would have been very battle scarred. What would have happened is I would have enjoyed my clients I would have loved, and then I
Yeah.
would have spent my whole time fighting for them, and I would have burned out quicker than a fireworks on July 4th. It would have been a big
Yeah.
flash and then it would all have been over. So I went into workplace psychology, because I loved work. And I
Mm.
thought, right, if work is healing for me, then maybe it's healing for other people who don't fit the mold. And what if we could make workplaces more inclusive? Then actually we would be losing far fewer people to depression, to mental distress, to withdrawal from society, if more people could engage in work. If workplaces were more engaging and inclusive, then so for me, workplace psychology became like an upstream strategy. So rather than going downstream and pulling people out of the river, going upstream and finding out why people are falling in, which is the quote from Archbishop Desmond Tutu
Yeah.
in South Africa. That's his quote about public health.
Hmm.
So my whole career is based on a grudge, and I think I have pretty successfully persuaded quite a few psychologists that they're very wrong about neurodiversity.
You have this
So
you have
tick.
this gift that tick. You have this gift that I hear from neurodivergent leaders, a lot, which is that I came from this place of feeling kind of bad about myself and a
Mm,
failure and a lot of shame. And then I found work and I
mm-hmm,
thought, I'm good at this. And
mm-hmm,
even though I had all that shame and sense
mm-hmm,
of failure, something kept me going
mm-hmm,
because I knew I had to do it.
mm-hmm,
You know,
mm-hmm.
I hear it. I hear it all the time. I think it's one of the most amazing things.
I know. And in clinical pathologizing literature, this is called justice sensitivity. There's actually a clinical term for this. We suffer from justice sensitivity.
Well, I don't even think it's always about justice. Sometimes I think it's when I talk to entrepreneurs who are tech
Mm,
founders, it's because, oh my God, I used this website and it was so
mm,
bad and it just pissed me off. So
mm-hmm,
sometimes it's
mm-hmm,
it's interest based. It's all
mm-hmm.
kinds of things. Yes, but we
Yeah.
do diminish it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We do. Um, You've written, that as public awareness and certainly social media influencers proliferate, we're talking about neurodivergence all the time. You say that, to be clear, the current diagnosis rates are nowhere near the estimated population prevalence, right? So people who are harping about how everyone's neurodivergent now are also wrong. But you also say that with the current approach of reactive one-to-one adjustments and the odd team of autistic coders, we aren't going to move the inclusion dial.
We're not.
Um, we're not. So how do we?
Well, we have to start looking at much bigger systemic issues. So things like job design.
Mm-hmm.
We have a terrible habit of doing what we've always done, because it's the easiest thing to do, right? So we
Yeah.
continually design jobs that are really great for generalist thinkers, jacks of all trades, but they're absolutely hopeless for masters, people who are
Mm-hmm.
particularly good at one or two things. Specialist thinkers can't do those jobs. So just to take a sort of, familiar phrase, we want someone who can work independently and in a team. So You do, but do you really? This is a data analyst role. What you actually want is someone who can work independently and can write great reports that the manager then takes to the team discussion.
That's right.
Do you actually, so we have this habit of looking for all rounders, and we do the same in education. We want everyone to pass and get to the basic level.
Mm-hmm.
And not, we're not necessarily streaming people into the higher levels of success. We want everyone to pass English, to pass maths, to pass science, and not necessarily, if we've got someone who's brilliant at science, they can just sack off English and maths and they can just do biology. Right? We don't allow that in education, and we also don't allow it in entry-level careers. So you don't get to specialize in the workplace until you're at senior level. And by that point, most people have had to crawl through 25 years of middle management, which is like, it's all about compliance and making sure that the rules are followed. Whereas senior leadership is all about breaking the rules and coming up with new ways to do things. So we've got this very ineffective talent streaming process that really screens out specialist thinkers, screens in generalist compliant thinkers, and results in very, very ineffective leadership, because the only people that can survive the process are the people who have those very, very fixed skills of compliance and generalism. So, in order to be more inclusive, we need to start having those conversations, and those are much harder strategic human resources conversations.
So that's really interesting. So in your perfect world, what would education look like, and what would early career look like?
Well, I think, so the opportunity to specialize. I think a generalist education, one of my sons absolutely has benefited from keeping a broad range of subjects into his, he's actually kept it into his degree. So he did the international baccalaureate instead of A-levels, which means he did 6 subjects. So he kept English, maths, science, humanities, all the way through to 18, which I know you do as a routine in the US, but in the UK, usually at 16, people go down to 3 subjects. So he kept 6 up until 18. And then in his degree, he's doing a combined Bachelor of Arts and Science. So he's doing both still, But my other son, Ollie, at 16, he did maths, advanced maths, and physics.
Wow.
And now he's studying engineering. It was plainly obvious to him that that's what he wanted to do. Now, he made it through his exams at 16. He got decent grades, but was that the best use of his time? He was always going to specialize over there, and I could have told you that when he was 7. That was clearly his pathway. And what about just that opportunity to specialize or to stay general from an earlier age, I think is really important.
Because go on.
I was just going to go on to say, my kids have been raised pretty middle class. They're pretty privileged kids, to be honest with you. But this particular issue has a much bigger implication in communities that have been marginalized by poverty. And, what I've seen a lot in our work in social justice is people that have no qualifications, no educational success whatsoever, but are absolutely fantastic visual spatial coordinators. So I remember once being in a prison, and we used to have this program in a prison where we would start with an IQ assessment. So we would start by working out somebody's spiky profile. What do you excel at? What do you not excel at? And then we would build a jobs program, a career pathing program around their strengths. And then we would carry on supporting them after they left prison to get those jobs. And I used to meet so many people that had above average IQs for problem solving, abstract reasoning, visual spatial thinking, and they had no qualifications, and they had no idea that they had skill. They had no idea that they had competence. They had no idea that they had value. And it was so stark to me one day. I was working in a prison in southeast London, which is attached to HMP Belmarsh, which is where the UK puts terrorism suspects. It's like literally the worst prison in the UK. And they have a youth offending institute there as well. Why they put the young people there, I do not know. But anyway, so I've got this group of young people, and I've done a spiky profile with them, so I know their IQ levels. I know the pattern. It's it's high visual spatial, low on working memory, attention, processing speed, and overall slightly above average. And then at the same time, we had a contract with a medical training school down the road, literally 3 miles down the road, also in South London, where we're doing diagnostic assessments for trainee doctors. And we're also measuring their IQs. And they're the same, Morra. They were the same IQs and the same profile. So I've got one cohort in medical school with below average working memory, below average processing speed, above average visual spatial reasoning, which is exactly what you want in a surgeon, FYI. You want people who are very much paying attention in the moment and have really good visual spatial reasoning. That's who I want operating on me, personally. So, that profile is working really well for those kids in med school. And then there's this bunch of other kids who are in prison, in the worst prison in the UK, with the same IQ.
Right.
And I don't have to tell you the difference between those two groups of kids, do I?
No.
And that's the frustration, that's the frustration that I've been fighting against with my career with Genius Within, and since I've been doing this work, which is 25 years now, is the right of people with those profiles to participate in the workplace to the full power of their potential, because the world isn't benefiting from them being in prison. And we need engineers, and we need surgeons, and we need architects, and we need people who can cut hair properly, and we need people who can design clothes that fit people, and we need people who can build bridges, and we need people who can plaster walls, and we need people who can mend machines. And those people are, a lot of them don't even realize they have that skill, because our education system does not measure it. Unless you can read, write, and do in your head maths, you leave school thinking that you have nothing to offer.
You're dumb. One of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking that always kicked my butt and is really frustrating, and I don't know if it's a uniquely American thing, is the obsession with being a team player and how that propels your career. A friend of mine who works at a large tech company said she was on a retreat. She's an individual contributor, very highly paid, very senior. She was on a retreat with other people in her band, and she said they're all kind of weirdos who don't get along with people. And they were trying to teach us about AI, right? Like they're trying to make us AI ready. And fast forward a couple of months, and a lot of those people are gone because they were in their roles because they had someone, a manager, who kept them safe. Who said, yeah, I know he could be difficult to work with, but he's really good. I really need him on my team. If that manager goes, they're vulnerable.
That is probably the top reason for people coming to Genius Within for coaching.
Really?
Yeah.
It's that they don't get along with people, or what?
No, the manager changing.
Oh.
Yeah. A new manager, a new workstation or space. So a change in the design of the environment, new software, or a promotion. Those are the top 4 things that are happening in somebody's career when they start to really be unable to cope and come to Genius Within for either an assessment or coaching or both. Yeah.
Talk about that process, because tell us about Genius Within. Tell us your particular specialty and how people find you and come to you.
A number of different ways, really. So the most common thing is that people are struggling in their career for whatever reason, and we provide workplace coaching that is neurodiversity centered and affirming. So that would be the four reasons, and usually the employer is paying.
So they know they're neurodivergent when they come to you.
Yes, so they know they're neurodivergent. or they suspect it, and we don't
Right.
need a diagnosis in order to provide that help. And typically the employer pays, and we get great results with that. So 95% of our coaching clients keep their jobs, 5% of them
Wow.
move on, and actually that's a good thing, because 5% of them shouldn't have been in those. They're in the wrong jobs. That's okay. We have to have
Mm-hmm.
some sort of, if they elegantly exit without a big employment tribunal, I think that's still a success. But the thing that I'm most proud of is that 25% of our clients get promoted within a year of our coaching.
Wow.
And the managers typically report a 50% improvement in performance and productivity. So we know that coaching works, and that's the focus of my PhD was evaluating coaching to find out how it worked, on what psychological variables was change being affected, as it were. It's a combination of reduction of stress, of the development of metacognitive awareness, so understanding your own thought patterns and how they manifest and either support you or not support you in the workplace, being able to control those thought patterns, and the mentalization work that you do around memory or planning or communicating, but also improved self-efficacy and, improved behavioral strategies, like things people do to manage time, so actually implementing some of those things and personalizing them. That's what people do in the coaching. But we get there we do typically use clean language. We are quite clean language based, because what I love about clean language is it centers the expertise on the client, not the coach. So it's not the coach's strategies that I'm teaching you. It's us working out what strategies are going to work by what you're already doing well. So we would start with, when you're planning and prioritizing at your best, it's like what?
Yeah.
And then
Let's do some clean language.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'll be the client.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously you're the coach.
Mm-hmm.
What should I be coming to you with? What's a good place for me to start to set you up?
Well, the most common topics that our clients come with are time management, organization issues, communication, memory, and relationships at work. So
I have a good one.
Okay. So I can either start by saying, when it's working well, it's like what, or I can say, what would you like to have happen, Morra?
Great. I'm in a really bad place with my boss because he thinks that I'm not responsive and I don't take my job seriously because I'm really behind on my email. And I don't know how to get out of this.
And what would you like to have happen? When you don't know how to get out of it, what would you like to have happen?
I just need to figure a way to keep on top of my email. Like, it can't be that hard. I'm smart. I'm good at my job. But this email thing is becoming a real problem with me and my boss and honestly, some of my colleagues.
Okay. And you'd like to find a way to keep on top of your emails. And when you're on top of your emails, that's like what?
It means that my inbox is like, I only have maybe 15 unread emails or 10, and I'm responding to people before they nudge me.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes I feel like people don't trust me or bring me in or give me things because they think I'm not going to respond.
Mm-hmm. And when you're on top of your emails and there's only sort of 10 to 15 that are unread, where does being on top of your emails come from? Or what happens just before you're on top of your emails?
I'm focused. I have energy.
Mm-hmm.
I have the ability to just go in and do it, without like worrying too much.
So you're focused and you have energy, and then you're on top of your emails, and there's only sort of 10 to 15 that are unread.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're focused and you have energy, what kind of focus and what kind of energy is that focus and energy?
I mean, the focus is that I can stay on my email window, and open them, but but have enough time and thought to respond thoughtfully, not just
Mm-hmm.
worry, like feel worried and anxious and just fire something off, like
Mm-hmm.
to work at a good steady pace so I can respond, but also respond, well.
You've got a good steady space, a good steady pace, and you've got
Hmm.
focus and you've got energy. And is
Hmm.
there anything else about focus like that? Does it have a size or a shape when you have
Oh,
focus?
a size or a shape.
So thinking about that focus, when you have focus and you're on top of your emails, does that focus have a size or a shape?
It's like a circle. It's like a contained circle,
Mm-hmm. So a
you
contained
know?
circle.
Yeah, it's not chaotic. It's like a calm, contained circle.
Okay. And whereabouts is that calmed, contained circle?
It's in me. It's like in my chest, and then it sort of stays on my inbox page.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's in your chest and it stays on your inbox page.
Yeah.
And then it's a steady pace, and then
Hmm.
you're on top of your emails,
Hmm.
only 5 to 10 to 15 unread. And what happens just before focus?
Um, maybe I have taken a break, so like my body, I feel like I can sit, because sometimes it's hard
Mm-hmm.
for me to sit for a long time, and my neck hurts, and then I get bored, and I think about other things, and I get up. I feel good in my body so that I can actually sit, maybe for
Mm-hmm.
a half an hour or even 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what needs to happen for you to feel good in your body like that?
I need to move, take a break. I think if I've just come from a long meeting, or having thought really hard or done something that feels hard, it's then hard for me to sit and then give that energy and focus
Mm-hmm.
on my emails. I need to have felt
Okay.
like I had a break.
Okay. So you need to feel like you've had a break. Otherwise, it's hard for you to sit. But if you've had a
Yeah,
break, you've got that focus, that energy, and that focus. And the focus is a contained circle, and it's in there, but it's also on the screen. And then
yeah.
you're on top of your emails. And then what happens?
Well, then I set my time, or I say I'm going to do this much, and I feel good because I can stop without worrying and feeling anxious, that I'm missing something, because I know that I'm on top of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And is there anything else about all that?
Well, that feels, I think it would be better if I did it in the morning, because I find my body doesn't hurt. I feel better and have more energy if I do email first thing in the morning, but it's sometimes
Mm-hmm.
hard to find that time. But I think if I could find that time in the morning, that would be good. And then maybe another block at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. So finding that time in the morning and then
Hmm.
another block at the end of the day. Okay. So since we're not in a coaching session, I'm going to stop us there. But what I would do at this point is I would get you to go and map that out as a little process. So what's the
Mm-hmm.
order that things happen in?
Hmm.
And then once you've mapped that out and written it, because I kind of want you to take it out of words and into something visual, because sometimes we then learn even more when we see it mapped out. And I could, we could carry on doing that for another 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and I could find out more about the nuances. But I'm already starting to see the structure of a strategy emerging of how you can manage your inbox, if you see what I mean.
Hmm.
So, what we know is that you need protected time at the beginning and end of each day. We already know that. We don't know how much time. We know that there's something about your physical comfort, and I might also start thinking about where you're sitting, what kind of
Hmm.
chair you're sitting in, whether you have a sit stand desk, what your opportunities for movement are that are easily accessible for you, like where can you go, and we would start building strategies based on what you're saying. Does that make sense?
Yes. I mean, I think what was really interesting about that and clean language is that, I don't know, listeners, if you can hear how Nancy responded, but she didn't create new language in her questions. she repeated words that I had said. Right?
It's exactly what I'm doing. I'm doing that very deliberately. I'm not paraphrasing you. I'm not hearing what you're saying and summarizing it in my own words. I'm giving it back to you exactly as you've said it. I am interpreting in that I'm pulling out certain words,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm ignoring other words. So you'll notice, for example, I didn't go into the relationships and whether about you feeling, I think you said trusted. So I think, I haven't gone there. I've gone to the mechanism of you being on top of your inbox, and I've
Mm-hmm.
gone there quite deliberately. So I am doing quite a lot in the background, but what I'm not doing is changing your words. I'm definitely not
Why
doing
not?
that, because what I want you to get into is a state where you're developing your metacognitive awareness of your own process. I want you to be in your mentalization. And if I make an inference of your words, so if I said something like, I'm trying to think of how to do it. I'm so trained to not do it. I can't think of how I would do it.
Give me advice, Nancy.
So if I said something like, so how do you feel about your inbox when it's overwhelming? Right? I'm introducing a whole bunch of things. I'm introducing feeling. Now, I don't know
Yep.
about your brand of neurodivergence, but a lot of neurodivergent people don't have interoception. So you might not know how you're feeling. So in order for you to answer my question, you have to come out of your experience. You have to think of what it is that I'm saying to you. You have to decide whether I'm right or not. And then you go back into your experience. You have to do a whole bunch of steps in order to process my question. Whereas if I just say being on top of your emails, that's like what? Then you get to stay in that experience of what it's like being on top of your emails. So I'm not taking you out of your metacognitive experience to find out whether I've got you or not,
Right.
You don't have to, because in normal everyday dialogue, that's what we do. We say, oh,
Right.
yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, for me, being on top of my inbox is it's really important, but I can handle 100 emails. I like 100 emails. Anything less than 100 emails, I feel good. So, and now you're not processing yours anymore. You're processing mine.
Mm-hmm.
And it might feel good because you might feel, oh, Nancy relates to me. She gets what I'm talking about. Gosh, 100 emails is a bit much. I don't know how she does that. But that's nice for a conversation. That's nice kind of building relationships and relatedness. But what it's not helping you do is understand your process. And what I want you to do is to understand your process so that you can start effecting change within your process and having clearer choices and predicting when you're going to find that stressful and when you're not going to find that stressful, and starting to go, right. So what I was doing was building a model with you of what it looks like when it works well. So this is the other thing that I very deliberately did. You gave me a problem to start with. You didn't give me a solution. You didn't give me an outcome. You didn't give me a goal. You gave me the problem. You told me what the problem was. And within that problem, there was a nugget of what an outcome might look like, which is to be on top of your emails. So I'm thought, right, that's the thing that she's given me that's the clearest goal. Out of all the things, she's given me a clear goal. And so she must have some sense of what being on top of her emails is like. So I'm going to find out if that's true. And so I pinpointed the bit of your initial statement that was a goal or could be a goal, and to try and find out if I could work that into a goal with you, which we did a really nice job of. And then once we've got that mapped out as a really clear goal, we can then go into a couple of different places. We can start building the behavioral strategies that go with that goal, which, as I said, you've already given me the clues of where to go. And we can also then go back to it and start thinking about the relationship implications and what that means for you, and why it's meaningful, and how you want to relate to your colleagues around that. Sorry, I'm going to have to plug my laptop in. It's losing its charge. One moment, caller. There we go. Yes, sorry about that. So that's what clean language does. My metaphor for clean language is it's like when you go to the hairdresser and they are showing you the back of your head with a mirror, so that you've got two mirrors. Clean language is like the mirror at the back of your head. I'm not introducing anything to you. that you haven't already got in your mind. All I'm doing is holding up
Yeah.
a mirror so that you can see the thing that is you from a couple of different perspectives, and then you go, oh, and you get some more information about it.
And also what was really interesting is that I kept saying, this makes me anxious. This makes me feel bad. Like, and you didn't
go
touch
there.
my feelings, as you just
No.
said. Would you at any point in the relationship?
Yes, but I wouldn't do it live whilst recording a podcast with someone I'm meeting for the first time, because feelings have a tendency to take us to inner child work. They take us to the sense that we sometimes have of being valued for what we do, not who we are, for our need to please. This podcast is called the Anxious Achiever podcast, so I know some things about you already, and I'm not necessarily going to start unpacking that in this context. And also in coaching is very much about future focus. Coaching is very much about what we want to do next, about achieving our goals, about finding solutions. It's not therapy. So sometimes if we go into feelings, we get a bit too close to therapy. And in coaching, it's sometimes appropriate to go around that and to go close to it, so that we can kind of see, is this something that needs to be in a different, do I need to refer this person for therapy? But what we don't start doing is theraping in coaching, because it's not appropriate. Right. We haven't contracted for that. We're in a workplace. So, if you've got some deep inner child work that you want to do, then I'm not going to do that with you in a workplace context. I'm going to send you to someone, or, we'll recontract and do it somewhere else. So I think that's about boundaries. So that's something that you learn in clean language is how to keep that focus, how to keep some guardrails on.
If listeners want to learn more about clean language, is there a resource you recommend they check out?
Oh, so many things. You're going to put me on the spot now to think of the names of the people in the US that are practicing this. Sharon. Oh, I can't remember her surname. There's a really good US practitioner in California who does clean language. But if you start Googling clean language California, you'll find
Sharon Clean Language California.
Sharon Small. I've just found
Sharon
her. There
Small.
you go.
Okay,
Sharon
perfect.
Small. But I would also recommend the work of Penny and James. So Penny Tompkins and James Lawley have written lots of books about clean language, and they have lots of learning materials. They have a website called cleanlanguage.co.uk, which is where most of the clean language resources are. And there's also the work of Marion Way and Caitlin Walker, who do international work as well as the UK, and they are very specifically workplace focused and coaching focused. They both do really good work, as does Angela Dunbar, as does Wendy and Judy Reese. Lots of really good practitioners in this space, but it's quite a niche. It's a niche field. It's a very niche field. But I mean, I came across clean language in my early 20s. It absolutely revolutionized my life. I absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. It gave me more self-development in the space of 3 or 4 sessions than any of the therapy that I'd ever had as a teenager.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I use it with my husband and my kids since I learned about it from reading you. And it has totally, there is a workplace angle here. It has totally shifted. What used to feel like for them was another conversation where mom's going to tell me what to do, from that into mom's good. She's here for me. She's going to listen and help me.
That's such an important thing that you just said. And this is the reason why I think clean language is one of the most foundational models for neurodiversity coaching, because it is about power and agency. In clean coaching, all of the power and all of the agency is resting with the client. And all of the data is coming from the client. It's your ideas. It's your work. All I'm doing is holding space for you to bring that out and putting a few mirrors up behind your head. And actually,
Mhm.
something about being neurodivergent is very disempowering.
Mhm.
We go and we get an assessment and someone assesses us and they know us better than we know ourselves and they decide whether we are this or we aren't that. And that can be a very disempowering experience. And then they tell us some things that we struggle with. And then we can say, well, there's no point in trying. If I'm going to struggle with these things, I'm going to struggle with these things. And so we
Yeah.
kind of get a bit of learned helplessness and we can't, we're disempowered. And I
Mhm.
think if you're coaching with someone, I mean, I used to focus very much on dyslexia coaching in my early days. And I used to think to myself, well, I'm not going to teach you to read and write. 12
Right.
years of education isn't going to be made up for in 4 coaching sessions. So what can I reasonably do in 4 coaching sessions that will actually make a difference to this person? And I think giving them back a sense of ability to affect their own lives, to make change, to improve themselves, to develop their own strategies for managing things like time and emails and organization. That's something that I can do for that person that will tangibly improve their work and their career and their sense of self. So it's very purposeful that we're
Mhm.
not giving you ideas. I'm not coming in going, right, oh, you need an email strategy. Okay, this is how people do email strategies. So,
Right.
the most typical strategy is that you box off time for it. So why don't you try Fridays? Do Fridays. Now, having listened to you, that's not going to work. Because by Friday, you're going to have so many emails, you're not
So
going to
many
get them down
emails.
to 10 to 15. You do need a daily strategy and you do need a top and tail strategy because the number of the goal you've got simply isn't workable if you're only doing it 3 times a week or once a week.
Yeah.
So I would come in with my big idea of what strategies I know have worked for my other clients, and I'm very likely to be wrong. Whereas if I sit and you come up with that strategy on your own, and we discover that it's intrinsically linked to movement, which I wouldn't have known without listening to you, there's a much better chance that it's going to work, but also it's yours. You did it. And that ownership and autonomy is so important for neurodivergent people who have been systematically gaslit and not kind of believed in to the point where we've internalized the idea that we are going to fail.
Mm. So that leads me to what I want to close with. You write a great column in Forbes, and in a Forbes piece, you sort of asked the question how neurodiversity celebration became toxic positivity. And you wrote that a truly inclusive workplace means dialing back the parenting and
Yes.
returning agency to neurodivergent adults.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about that. Parenting is a really strong choice of words. I love it. What talk about what's going on here and what the problem is.
So, are you aware of transactional analysis?
I am, but probably you
Yeah.
should explain it.
Okay, so transactional analysis is a sort of theoretical framework in psychology. It kind of originated in family systems therapy, and it's very prevalent in addiction work. And it's the idea of kind of power dynamics and the transactional relationships that we have with different people. So one idea in transactional analysis is the drama diamond. So this idea of a victim, a persecutor, a rescuer, and a bystander as kind of archetypal roles that we might learn in our family dynamics. So, stereotypically, we might have a persecuting father and a rescuing mother, like, oh, let me
Mm-hmm.
sort that out before your dad gets home or he'll be very cross. So your mum does it for you because she doesn't want you to get into trouble with your dad. But what's happening is you're not learning how to do it for yourself. So you're a child. So that dynamic, and if we get stuck in those dynamics, we can take those dynamics into the workplace, and those dynamics are rife in the workplace. So
Yes.
we run models of managers as parents. We're
Yep.
all doing that all the time. My boss is my mum, or my boss is my dad, is
Right.
like a model. And so
Overfunctioner, underfunctioner listeners of this podcast will be very familiar with that too. We talk about that a bunch.
100%. Yeah. So all of those dynamics are happening in our workplaces. And a trend that I have seen recently emerging since the awareness of neurodiversity went up is that managers think that to be neuro-inclusive, they have to make up for what their neurodivergent employees can't do themselves. So they either have to smooth over relationships, or they have to do the work that that person can't do, or they have to make so many time allowances that effectively that person is delivering less work for the same amount of money as their team. And so that for me is a rescuer position. It's a rescuer role. It's a parent dynamic and the employee is a child. We're assuming that that employee cannot grow. We're assuming that that employee needs help rather than has the capacity for growth and self-development. We're assuming that they can't learn to manage relationships themselves. We're assuming that they won't be able to develop a time management strategy that will work for them. We're making a whole bunch of assumptions, and what we're actually doing is putting a limit on what that employee can do in their career, because we have decided for them that they can't do this, so we are going to do it for them. And then the problem with that, there are so many problems with that, I don't know where to start really, but a big problem with that is that the manager moves on.
Right.
Or the manager runs out of steam.
Yeah.
You know, that's the other thing that happens. The manager is doing this with the best of intentions, but, you know, after 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, the rest of the team are grumpy. The manager has a change in circumstances. Maybe a parent goes into hospital, or a child has a need, or they're going through a divorce, and they can't do what they were doing to support that individual anymore. At which point they go to human resources and say, "Look, I'm really struggling with this person's performance. I need neurodiversity support." HR are like, "Well, why on earth haven't you come to me before? I mean, this is clearly not sustainable. Of course, that person has to be able to do their job. Why are you doing 25% of it for them?" At which point the neurodivergent person has to have this conversation, who then, and the neurodivergent person then feels completely destabilized because they thought everything was fine. And then it turns out that actually their boss doesn't think they're capable of growth, and their boss has been doing 25% of their job for them. And it's like having the rug pulled from underneath your feet. You know, it takes the wind out of you. And so at that point, everybody is in a crisis. And usually that's when they pick up the phone to Genius Within and say, "Could we help, please? Could we get some help, please?" And I'm like, just stop running that pattern, people. It's really, really bad. You know, let's believe in neurodivergent people. We can grow. You know, being autistic doesn't mean you're always going to struggle with social communication in your workplace. Being an ADHDer doesn't mean that you're never going to be sensitive and be a good listener, and you're always going to be late. You know, there's nothing kind of finite in a prediction world about that label and those skills, but people, that's what people are doing. I actually had a senior human resource professional say to me these exact words: "How much unprofessional behavior do I have to accept at work in order to be neuro-inclusive?"
Well, Nancy, because the question that is popping into my head as you're saying is like, but where's the line of you getting accused of encouraging people to mask?
Well, me getting accused of encouraging people to mask. I'm not encouraging people to mask, but I am encouraging people to grow. I don't think you have to mask in order to manage relationships at work, or to communicate in an effective way, or to build an agreement of what good communication looks like that involves compromise on both parts, and you know, have an understanding that yes, typically meeting minutes will come out before the meetings, but sometimes that won't be possible. And if it's not possible, this is what I'm going to do in this situation. That's not masking. That's self-awareness, and it's compromise, and it's adult to adult negotiation. You know, ideally, we all send out meeting agendas in advance, and when we don't do that, it disproportionately affects some neurodivergent people. But sometimes we have to call an emergency meeting. at which
Yep.
point I am perfectly okay for a neurodivergent person to say, I'm really sorry, but because we haven't had any notice of this meeting, I'm feeling really discombobulated. Can we just take 5 minutes to just check what we're actually going to cover? And then is it all right if you want a response from me? Can I go away and think about it and bring you the response tomorrow? So I'll hear you in this meeting, but I won't be able to respond in this meeting. Is that okay? Yes, that's fine.
Yeah.
So that's not masking. That's just adult behavior at work.
That's right.
So yeah,
I think that's a very, I don't know that there's enough education on that difference.
that's a very good point. I don't think there is either. And that's the education that I think will be the last little bit of my career legacy. And that's what I think I started with that leadership book is that's the message I'm trying to get across. Being neurodivergent means that some of these things don't come naturally to us, or that we are we're on a different end of a spectrum in how we prefer information or sensory experiences. But it doesn't mean that doesn't mean that things are always going to be the way that we want them. And if they're not the way that we want them, well, not going to do any work then. That's not feasible. And that's not going to lead you to a successful career in any field whatsoever. But one of the reasons I know this is because Genius Within is majority neurodivergent. So, we have neurodivergent thinkers that can't think creatively unless they're being spontaneous and impulsive, working with neurodivergent thinkers that can't think creatively unless there's a structure and a plan and an agenda. So how do those two people work together? And if we're not doing hierarchy, and we don't always make it that the manager always has to fold to the employee or the employee always has to fold to the manager, because that's hierarchy. It's, in that respect, the manager is always the parent. They're either the bullying parent or the simpering parent, but they're still the parent. So if we take that out of the equation, and these are two adults, then what they do is they negotiate. They go, right, okay, so we're going to do this project together. So let's start with a walk where I can just freestyle and have some creative ideas. And then let's go back and let's put everything in a timeline, and I'll sit and do that timeline with you. Or we do the timeline first and then we freestyle the ideas, but we work out how to respond to each other's needs. And that for me is just such a deeply human need and such a deeply important skill to develop for anybody working with any form of diversity or living in a community or having a family of people with different personality traits. Like it's a really important skill. And I think if we always fold to the neurodivergent, or if we never fold to the neurodivergent, am I back? Oh, I just think I lost you there. So yeah, so it's just a really important skill. If we always fold to the neurodivergent, or if we never fold to the neurodivergent, that skill isn't being developed. We're not learning from the neurodivergent, and the neurodivergent isn't learning from being in the workplace. So, okay.
I think that's an amazing place to leave it. I could talk to you forever. Your wisdom is so deep, but thank you. I really want to thank you for your time.
Thank you.